Namaste and welcome to the second conversation of the Essential Conversation series. Today I'm going to be in conversation with Bob Toth, who for many years served as the executive director of the Merton Institute for Contemplative Living. He's been an active member of the Contemplative Alliance, currently serves on the board of the Lake Erie Institute, and is engaged in writing a book with two other authors called Earth Mind. Well, welcome, Bob.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This is
So I just want to, where do we begin? Um, the purpose is really how those of us who are essentially contemplatives and have contemplative practice, how can we respond to what's happening when it seems every day we're hit from all sides with energies that seek to spark anger and fear, two negative emotions that are really harmful to the whole human community. How are we not going to just protect ourselves, but counter these energies, the negative energies of anger, fear, and hatred that are just bombarding human society intensely right now?
well, I think we need to look at the complex contemporary problems as a spiritual crisis, not just in politics, but something that applies to the crises that all the guiding institutions of society are experiencing. And so the term spirituality is interpreted and understood in many different ways. We are spiritual beings, but what does that mean? The Shalem Institute, I think, has produced one of the best descriptions that I like to refer back to. And in a monograph that they entitled Contemplative Spirituality, they wrote, spirituality, they describe spirituality as a deep ocean current, often unseen, but flowing through all our experience, moving us to seek fulfillment and connectedness, impelling us toward truth, goodness, and beauty. Something deeply interfused that rolls through all things. It is both personal and collective. Spirituality is not something special or extraordinary. It is absolutely ordinary and natural. Everyone has a spiritual life. We may isolate it as being in personal spiritual practices or something connected to places of worship, but it is inherent in all the activities of our daily life. And having worked with Thomas Merton, he often insists throughout his writings that our everyday life is our spiritual life, that there is no separation. And what strikes me about this description are the key words: connectedness, truth, goodness, and beauty. And if we accept these four attributes or qualities, connectedness, truth, goodness, and beauty, as defining measurements of what it means to be spiritual, as essential components of being human, and evaluate how we see them manifest in our personal lives, in our culture, and in the guiding institutions of society, I think we might begin to get to the source of the spiritual crisis. So that brings us to the point of, what are the major sources of this crisis? And just to bring them to our attention, anthropocentrism, the self-centeredness and narcissism that we find throughout our culture and many other cultures throughout the world. The dehumanization, as you mentioned, that is an effect of this destruction deconstruction of relationships. Um, and then there are other factors too that I think we need to bring into the conversation. How does globalization fit into this, and technology and artificial intelligence? And I think at some point we can see these as interrelated movements that form a collective force that's challenging our traditional values and virtues.
You can see the dehumanization. I mean, AI is a whole nother level of that. But just in the language of our politics now, how dehumanizing it is, and how the other is demonized. So this word that you use, connectedness. I mean, that's so important actually in terms of awakening compassion and empathy and just awareness of one's own vulnerability. So what we're really talking about is a shift in consciousness, a shift in regaining basic human values. I mean, as you described, spirituality is not something that's separate or different. It's these innate values that have been sort of shoved aside
Mm-hmm.
that we need to reclaim. I was listening to a podcast the other day where a social scientist was saying that to change for a movement to have impact, it's got to reach a certain percentage. And the percentage that this social scientist had come up with after a lot of research was 3.5%. If 3.5% of a population change their way of thinking about a topic, it shifts everything. So in the United States, that would be about 12 million people. Um, so we can talk about that as having a social effect, changing the way people think about a social issue. But in terms of spiritually, a shift in consciousness, uh, um, it is perhaps it's the same thing. If a certain number of people really begin to feel love for the earth and care and protection for the earth and the ecosystems, connectedness, would that shift the way we function as a society? If people began to feel that toward each other, would we be able to overcome this otherness, this demonization of the other? Um, and we all have a part to play, right? I mean, that those 12 million people, we all need to add ourselves to that
Yeah,
collective.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think I know there is a lot going on that is in contrast to um, the um, the effects of our anthropocentric culture and all of these other contributing factors, and um, and I think that you know that more than just how do I want to say this uh, more than just um, taking some action. um, I guess it's right along with what you're saying. That action needs to have some connection to the transformation of consciousness. It's not just opposing what's happening,
Right.
but it's changing what's happening. That's
Well,
what I'm
that's a
trying to get to.
key
Yeah.
point. I think that's a crucial point, um, because it's very easy to be angry at a lot of things that are going on where it's causing suffering and, opposing our core principles as a nation, et cetera. Um, I suddenly had a realization that anger, I was adding to that anger energy when
Mhm.
you're angry at a specific action taken, you're adding to that cloud,
Yeah.
of anger. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing with fear. I mean, a lot of things that are trying to awaken fear in us. I mean, it just we have to avoid the pitfalls of responding in that way, because action without a change in consciousness is not going to really provide provide the deep changes that we need. I mean, we need systemic changes, and just taking, an action to oppose another action, it
Yeah.
won't lead to the systemic change, lasting change that we need to move human society forward.
Yeah. 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 You mentioned movement, and I think that's you know uh, a key to it, because it's not just the individual efforts. They're, they've got to become a collective, and there's got to be something that unites them in becoming a movement. And so I think in discussing all of this, we're trying to get to, what is that the core of what all of these movements are trying to accomplish. And I think with all of the deconstruction that has happened in our culture through politics and organizations that are involved in changing uh, our institutions, not for the better, but for particular purposes and for particular individuals. um, with all of that, um, I really think um, we, what they've lost, I think, is the values and virtues. And what keeps coming back to me is this concept of virtues. And they provide kind of a foundation for how we can, as a movement, move forward. So, those four uh, parts of that definition of spirituality: connectedness, truth, goodness, and beauty. And I think they form um, at least a point of discussion, for these things that are being uh, overwhelmed by what's going on in the world today. How to resurface connectedness, truth, goodness, and beauty.
I mean, if it those are like aspirations, right? I mean,
Yeah,
uh, uh, um, but in terms of the virtues, I mean, there's been talk for quite a while, although it's not entered the mainstream really. It's on the periphery of, can we survive? Can our Earth survive? Can human species survive unless we deal with greed? Unless we deal with hubris. When you talk about this human centric, it's really a hubris
yeah,
that filters through attitudes toward other people, attitudes toward other life forms, animal. It's a basic way of looking at yourself as being a superior being, right?
yeah,
And so hubris, this arrogance that we see, it's almost as if we've reached the pinnacle, where greed is
mhm,
now out in the open and
yeah,
condoned. It's like, be as
yeah,
greedy as you want, grab
yeah,
as much as you can.
yeah,
Hubris, nobody's going to tell us what to do. We're going to do whatever we want. And we've reached the pinnacle now. There's nowhere to go but down.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's all a delusion. Um, but delusions um, can reach a point where they collapse, and I think it feels like we're reaching some close or getting closer to the point where these delusions will just collapse. There's both through resistance to it, but also to alternatives to it. And that's what, the movement that I think we're looking for is offer something better than what people are experiencing now. Make it attractive.
When I think of what the individual can do, so that's another part of this conversation, is what the individual can do. In my own life, when I've looked at the corruption and the greed out there, I say to myself, well, what's the counter action for greed? It's generosity.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so to be more generous in our own lives, and that's not just about finances, generosity of time, generosity of love, uh, generosity of being. I mean, so when I look at this, and I'm very, I think in terms of the statistics as well, when you have a strong collective that is gathering more money to itself, there has to be an opposing collective that's that is the expression of generosity, and in terms of the hubris and the arrogance, the humility. So how we can express humility in our lives, that's something that we all need to reflect on. How we become expressions of generosity and humility.
yeah. I have mentioned to you that when we have been working with Teokason, uh, he has often told us that there are no words in Lakota for things. And one of them was there's no word in Lakota for happiness. And that when he said that, we reacted, John and I reacted by saying, well, you know what we mean by happiness. And he says, yes, yeah, it's an illusion because you never, it's something that eludes you. You're happy, you're unhappy. You seek something else to fill it, and he says, no. So we said, well, what word would you use to describe what we're talking about? And he said, goodness. And he said, if we can feel the goodness and it's there in everything and experience that rather than seeking happiness and seeing the goodness in ourselves. Um, he said, there's no illusion in goodness. It is inherent in everything. And if we can just realize, how good we are and act out of that mode, rather than seeking things that are just distractions and illusions.
Think how different it would be if our founding documents, instead of saying everyone has the right to the pursuit of happiness, everyone has the right for the pursuit of goodness.
Goodness, yes. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, happiness is often associated with things,
Oh,
acquisitions,
yeah,
or prestige and status or whatever. They're all external things. Um, but goodness is character.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
and I think that's one. I mean, clearly, if you look at our world today, character has been lost. Character is not factored into anything, really. People don't think of character as being primary, a person's character. Uh, uh, I mean, for an elected official, you would think character would be primary, but it's way
yeah,
down there.
yeah, 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 yeah. And back to the definition of spiritual. It's about good connectedness, truth, goodness, and beauty. Um, and all four of those things are are uh, are suffering. Uh, and um, if we can just focus, I think, uh, and it's got to be experiential.
It
You
has
know,
to be experiential. Some years ago, I had, as I was going to the UN climate conference, I had a dream about a whale. And the whale, I was standing by my apartment overlooking the East River in Manhattan, and a large whale swam up the river, stopped in front of my apartment, and we made eye contact. And all could say was, I hear you. The next day I was at the UN climate conference thinking, I think I just agreed to represent the whales here. Of course, there was no word about whales. It was very frustrating. I went to all the sessions I could on the seas, not a mention of the life in the seas. But ever since that time, which was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, ever since that time, whenever there's been a tragedy in the news about whales, dying or beaching or whatever, I feel it in my heart because I made a connection
Yeah.
that remained with me. I am connected to the whales. I'm somehow spiritually linked with them because that whale approached me and I said, I hear you. There was
Yeah.
some bond that was developed. And so when you say experiential, that changed me.
Yeah.
Having that experience, that was a real experience. Some dreams are real life experiences. And that was, and you can tell if it changes you, if it leaves a deep impact, not just an unconscious dream. And, so I say to myself, I'm not working in marine biology, so there's not much I could do in that way for the whales, but I can be present for them. And I think when we talk about connectedness, that's part of it. Being present for all the life forms on Earth, being present for the Earth
Yeah.
and feeling our connection. And if 12 million of us in this country practice that, it would make a difference because there needs to be a certain collective energy that will then filter into the whole. We have to realize that there's a collective mind. And so when a lot of people are feeling anger or fear, they're just receiving what's being put out into the collective mind, you know? And, they just are responding with anger or fear or whatever. But if we can put a different energy into the collective field, the energy of connectedness,
Yeah.
that would also have an impact.
Yeah. No, so, in our book, Earth Mind, it's the central theme is um, uh, the distinction between our anthropocentric consciousness and what the indigenous people experience that we're calling Earth Mind, and it's a consciousness that is deeply connected to the natural world and all that the natural world means to us, how we are part of it, completely interconnected, and how we've lost those connections. But so, working with Tiokasin through now 8 years on this, um, we've our personal sense of it, has really, really evolved. But the one thing that we did that was experiential, that really drove this home, was when we went to Standing Rock, when well, we call it a protest, they call it a protection, was going on. And we're actually engaged in the community that was formed in that camp. And it was a moving experience, but it was like liberating because um, there was a focus on collectively doing something about something that wasn't right, and there was just an underlying spiritual dimension to the whole effort. But and and what we experienced was this whole concept of interrelatedness, because people came from all over the world and were there, and we were just one community, and there was no leadership, no official leadership. if something needed to be done, someone did it, and it worked. And so a lot of the concepts that we have about power and authority and all of that weren't there. And so, how people can experience things, and it rises out of, first of all, being really grounded in our connection with the natural world. It's a source of revelation to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Being connected to the natural world and to everything, actually,
Yeah.
to each other, to the moon, to the sun. I mean, feeling ourselves as part of this web of life. And I mean, that is the shift in consciousness, because that alone shifts you from this hubris to a humility
Mhm.
of we're just part of something so much bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But
that's
we are
where we
part of it.
find, yeah,
Yeah.
that's where we find truth and goodness and beauty. And those are the spiritual effects.
So probably the most important thing we can do right now, as the world teeters on the edge, is to really work to build this collective,
Mhm.
to build this collective who are also walking down that path
Mhm.
of deeper interconnectedness, deeper humility, deeper generosity, deeper love, and just not playing in those fields that that are seeking to awaken hostility and polarization, and just not engaging in those fields.
Yeah. And we will reach the tipping point.
We will reach the tipping point. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah. Well, this
All
has been
right.
great.
Well, thank you, Bob. It was wonderful as always to speak with
Yeah.
you. Take
And
care.
with you. Mhm.
Take care.
Right.